So if you were starting a business today, no money, no relationships, how would you start it?
I would bring in a co-GP mentor type investor slash partner to help me mold the business and have a sounding board to come back with as you keep testing things. And so I think if you take the perspective of like, I don't belong here, so I have to outwork and outsmart to the best of your ability everyone while maintaining amazing relationships. It's a hard challenge to sort of balance all of that. But I think that you need to take the opportunities that are given to you and run with them as fast as you can. If you find someone who's willing to mentor you, who has really good advice and sort of direction, you should take advantage of that until they tell you you can't take advantage of it anymore.
Martin, thanks for being here. Welcome to the Inside Deal.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So Cranford, New Jersey. Actually, it started in South Africa.
Yes.
So you are first generation American, moved to New Jersey when you were 2 years old.
Correct.
Let's hear about it.
Look, it was, I grew up in in New Jersey, but spent a lot of time in South Africa because we were first generation here. So all of our family was back in South Africa. So all my summers and vacations were essentially spent going back to see the family. But when we moved to America, it was me and my two brothers at the time, later had a sister, and we grew up in this really cute town. It was great. It was small. It worked for us. And I have really fond memories of sort of growing up in that town.
Awesome. What were you like as a kid?
I was the youngest of the three brothers. So I took a big beating day to day. So physically took some harm until we all leveled out physically, and then we all stopped hitting each other. But a lot of sports, a lot of competition, played a lot of soccer, basketball, tennis growing up. And so I would say pretty standard upbringing, really positive. I look back really fondly, loved going to the school. I went to Solomon Schechter Day School from kindergarten all through 12th grade, had a great high school career as well, like really enjoyed everything I did, and then went off to college.
Did you have any exposure to real estate or any thoughts that you wanted to get into real estate or anything, or doing anything entrepreneurial as you were growing up?
Yeah, very little. My grandfather back in South Africa was a very entrepreneurial person, particularly on my father's side and my mother's side. On my father's side, and he had owned some real estate, but not anything that was relevant to us or anything like that. It was nothing that sort of resonated with me until later. And I got into real estate. I was like, oh, my grandfather, had made some investments into some real estate and was a very entrepreneurial guy. So I thought that like there was some connectivity there, but nothing that sort of resonated through from a real estate. And I think as we start speaking a bit more, you'll understand that actually wasn't the direction that I initially went in life.
The pivot, that's something we're going to discuss later. But so was there like a lot of successful entrepreneurs like you have, or selling baseball cards and wheeling and dealing? Was that you as a kid or?
So it's interesting. Like I haven't really ever discussed this particular part of my background, but I actually have like a severe learning disability. So, you read about it later, how entrepreneurs all sort of have that
very common,
that commonality to it. So what I would say to you is like, we used to trade cards but I was never running a business. I was like really struggled through school.
Okay.
Like I had to work 3 times harder than the next guy to pull B's.
Right.
That was just my life. And I sort of got used to that work ethic and trying to solve problems in ways that I could sort of survive through school.
Yeah.
In today's times, there's so many more sort of resources available to people that have those challenges. But when I was growing up, it was like I had a reading tutor and they're like, hey, you can't read. And I'm like, yeah, I can't read. So like, that was the end of the conversation.
It's almost a blessing. I mean, you hear that's such a common thread of successful entrepreneurs, because I feel like you have to use your imagination, your creativity. You have to do other things. And,
I found myself grinding much harder than most of my peers my entire scholastic career. Like people would study for 45 minutes, I'd study for 2 hours. And I think it created a work ethic in me that like has resonated throughout my life.
So interesting. So you graduated high school, you went off to SUNY Albany.
Yep.
Tell me about it.
Look, I came first generation in America. My kids today don't have this experience, but like my parents didn't really know the college protocol.
Right.
So At that time, my family had relocated from New Jersey to Long Island in my senior year of high school. So that was a big change for me. And we weren't financially, able to support more than a state school.
Right.
And my parents were like, you're going to a SUNY school because it's the state school of New York, and pick whichever one you want. And I went to visit Albany, and I think I went to visit Binghamton, and I had more fun in Albany. So off to Albany I went. There was no
good choice.
It was, I had great times in Albany. But now seeing what my family, like my kids and all my network of friends, like what their kids are going through, is a very different college experience.
Yeah, I think just, my kids are younger and still in elementary school and junior high, but just seeing the whole college process from some of my friends is just,
it's crazy.
Completely different ballgame.
It's a different world we live in today. But it's a good world. Like, I don't mind the change. And a lot of it came down to just lack of knowledge from my parents. Like, they didn't go to high schools or colleges. So they didn't know the system. They didn't know the protocol. So my sibling, me and all my siblings all basically went to like state schools because that's what we understood.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, I think there's a lot of really good schools out there. And I say to my kids all the time, I don't really care where you land up as long as you're learning and you're having a good time.
100%.
Because I think people come out of all different worlds and are successful, not successful. Just because you go to Harvard doesn't mean you're successful.
Yep.
And just because you go to X, Y, and Z school doesn't mean you're not going to be successful.
Could not agree more. So your first thought of a career, you were pre-med and you thought you wanted to go to med school.
Yep.
So you graduated, you wanted to take a year off, and you worked in a hospital? Or?
Yes. Yeah. So just quick background there is like, I decided to do pre-med through college. So I spent 4 years really, and pre-med is no fun.
No joke.
Like, the group of people that I would socialize with were not the same group of people that like everyone else was socializing with. It was like we were working really hard.
Yeah.
And I, for whatever reason, ever since I grew up, I just always thought being a doctor was really cool and fun, and you can make money. And all the doctors that I knew in the late 80s were like doing well. It was a different system, right? Because it wasn't sort of publicized at that point. So went through that whole process, and I'd studied a lot. So I decided I was going to take a year off in between college and going to pre-med. And I went to work in a hospital in Long Island called Long Island Jewish. And I worked in hospital administration. So I wasn't even working in medical. And what I realized being there was it just wasn't my passion. Right. And the doctors that I saw there were like passionate about the medical practice. I was passionate about making money. Right. Yep. So that was two different things. And it's a long haul to go down that road of 10 years of school to then come out on the backside and be a doctor.
Yep.
So it was a major pivot. There's always pivots. We were talking about before. There's a lot of pivots in my career. And that was by far the biggest first pivot for me, which was, this isn't right for me. Contrary to all the 4 years of work that I put into it. And I assume your parents are thrilled. You're going to have a doctor in the family, all that noise. And I had to make a big pivot and say, this isn't for me. And at that time, investment banking, which I would say is equivalent to like hedge fund and private equity today, was the number one job you could get. And all my friends were trying to get those jobs. So I put my resume together for an investment banking job. I didn't even know what it meant. Frankly, right? Yep. I had no knowledge of it. And just put my resume out there and started, anyone who would meet with me, I would meet with. And I surprisingly landed up at a boutique real estate investment banking firm called Wells Hill Partners. And that's my first exposure to real estate. If I would have landed up in a different asset class, like who knows where I would have been. Just by chance, it happened to be banking in real estate.
I think you touched on something I think is so important for anyone choosing a career is you knew that there wasn't passion with medicine. And if you're going to be successful at anything, it's so important that you're passionate about it. You have to be passionate first. And because then when you're working at it, it's not actually work. You're just truly passionate. But
look, I think it's both, right? You need to really enjoy what you're doing. That when I was doing investment banking, I didn't love sitting behind a computer for 18 hours a day, right? That was not so much fun, but I was learning a lot, and I started to understand sort of real estate from an operational perspective, from a financing perspective. I did a lot of modeling, and I had some really good mentors at that time. That's another big thing I think is really important for students is like, when you find someone who's willing to mentor you and is good at it, you should grab onto that person and not let them go.
Yep.
And I had a couple of those in my career that were like life-changing for me because they taught me so much about that specific part of the business that they were really, really strong at.
Totally. So you became you were working in real estate investment banking. You became passionate about it. You were learning the financial side of the business, modeling, skills, analysis. How long were you there for?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
So you just, you made another move, and talk to me about kind of your next.
So look, I think there's a bunch of different skills you need to have in real estate, and you don't have to have all of them, but you need to be really good at some of them, right?
Yep.
So to me, number one for me in my career was I learned how to model, right? I learned how to physically model and write like actual code, which I still use today. Like I don't use it at the same level I did, but like if someone sends me a model, I understand how to manipulate that model enough to like be able to manage my own sort of in my head. I want to sensitize this, so I'm able to do that. What I realized, I don't want to sit behind a computer all day, but I loved real estate. I started to really like real estate. I would see other people's investment ideas because as an investment banker, you're servicing a client. The client's got an idea. I want to build this. I want to buy this. So like, it was interesting to me to see sort of what that was all looking like. So I then went to work for an actual operator, an owner operator developer based out of New Jersey called Atlantic Realty Development Corporation. And there I had a very unique opportunity. I was able to sort of I think I was there for about 6-7 years. I was able to move around within their company and really see different parts of the business. So I started off in property management, commercial property management. Then I got a bit into residential property management. Then I built some single family homes. Then I got involved in a large sort of ground up multifamily development project. And then ultimately I got involved in an acquisition of a large development deal in New York. And so that's pretty unique because usually you get pigeonholed into like a job where like, okay, you're only doing this. And I was very fortunate and thankful for the opportunities I got there to sort of move around and get, 1 to 2 years of experience in each one of these different departments.
So important to be able to move around and see a lot of different things early in your career, because you're seeing, you're not passionate about every part of the business. Like, you might not be interested in property management, but you're interested in construction or vice versa. And in order to be really successful at whatever you're going to be doing, not only do you have to understand all facets of the business, especially if you're building your own company or you're an entrepreneur, you have to really be, spending most of your time what the subset of the business that you're really good at and where you're really adding value and passionate as well.
Yeah. I think one other thing I would comment on that is if you're really in the weeds in property management for a year, 2, 3, and then you're in the weeds of this and that, like I have a deep appreciation and understanding of like what everyone's job is at my company.
Yeah.
Right. I have a deep understanding for what it means to be a property manager on site shoveling snow at 4:00 in the morning. Cause I used to go at 4:00 in the morning.
You can say you did it.
See it. Right. So like, I really understand the nuances of each one of those things. And I thought that training has resonated a lot with me. And as we built our business, myself and my partner, we were the ones doing all of the work originally.
Right.
Today, it's a much larger business. But when we started, I was the one doing the construction management. I was the one doing the property management. I was the one doing the modeling. Like I did the actual physical work.
Right.
So I think there's a deep appreciation and understanding for what that means when we're hiring people and we're working with people and sort of trying to grow the business.
100%. So you were at Atlantic Realty Development.
Yep.
How long were you there for?
About 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
So now you're in the real estate business for 10 years. You've acquired all different types of skills. You decide to go out on your own.
Mm-hmm. There was something that came over me at some point in the last like 12 to 24 months where I just felt like I could do more. I don't know how to explain it differently.
I know. You feel like you reached a ceiling a little bit and you're not learning as much.
Yeah. And it's just like, I understand what I'm doing now. Like it's almost like on autopilot.
Yeah.
And like, that's not enough for me.
Yep.
And there's risk associated with making that a pivot again, because there's just another major pivot. Because I could have sat at that job and been very happy, likely fairly successful, and lived a really wonderful life. Right? Yep. It's a great firm, great people, like super supportive of them. I just felt something was missing, and I felt like I could do something more.
Yep.
And so I decided to leave. I'm sure you did. I mean, you've done it. You've done it as well, and it's scary.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
And this is the most interesting part, I think, of my career is I made that pivot. I started a company called N2 Realty with my brother at the time, and it failed. Right. And so fast forward of why it failed, but it was a bad timing and all that kind of stuff. But I made big decision where I pivoted away from a really great opportunity that could have been forever. And my first big time on my own, I'm like, I'm ready to go.
Yep.
And within 18 months, the company failed. And that was a huge hit to like my understanding of myself. Was this the right decision? Was it not right decision? And I learned a lot from it, but it was a huge change. And I think so many people think your trajectory is like this.
Yep.
And I've never seen it that way for myself or most
Never.
people that I know. It's very much like this. And then hopefully you land up in a place where you're sort of gradually growing.
Yep.
But I had some serious speed bumps along the way.
It's such a good point, because what I think is really unique about your story is, people think it's binary a lot of times. Okay, you've been successful in working for X, Y, and Z companies for X amount of time. Now you're finally going off on your own. They think, the common wisdom is, all right, you're going to either succeed or fail based upon this first venture you're doing on your own. Most times you just hear about, okay, someone started their own company and did really well.
Right.
You started your own company after 10 years of being in the business and acquiring all these skills and failed.
Yep.
That is that's powerful. And, it speaks to, your ability to be resilient and keep on going and keep on trying to see angles. And, I'm sure there was many sleepless nights that you think you blew it, but that kind of led you to the next opportunity.
Yeah. Look, I think that I don't know anyone who hasn't failed at some point. Right.
Yeah.
It may not have been at the same level as me. I viewed myself as failing. I'm sure people have failed way more than me, and still bounced back and figured out sort of the right path for themselves. I think in your career is a long career, right? Career could be 30 to 50 years. That's a long period of time, right? You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have moments where it feels amazing and you're on top of the world. And then moments where you're like, I can't believe this is happening. And I think you have to be aware of when it's happening. You have to save your energy for the times that are really tough. Something that I've learned in life, like conserve your energy when things are great and use it when times are tough.
Yeah.
Because you're going to need it. Everyone needs it. It could be personal life or it could be business life, but when times are tough is when all your energy needs to be put into those moments.
And the definition of business is solving problems. So things are always going to be tough at some point. There's lots of highs, and, you have to stay even keeled, and you have to kind of think clearly and figure out where the next opportunity is and kind of how to minimize that downside and solve for that upside. So N2 Realty didn't work. It was in the middle of the GFC.
Correct.
And that was the concept there was
our idea was we were going to build a business that was going to do like mezzanine or pref equity deals for other groups and developers and sort of plug the hole of where we thought there was a hole in the capital stack at the time.
Right.
But to your point, GFC hit, you couldn't do any business. There was nothing to do.
Frozen.
It was just absolutely lights out. And the lesson learned looking back is like timing is so important in your career.
Yep.
Right. I actually feel very badly for kids coming out of college today because it's a tough time in real estate to get a job, but that will move. Like that timing moves. And no matter what we would have done during those 18 months, in my opinion, I don't think there was anything we could have tried harder, been smarter. It just, the timing was the timing.
Yep. It can also be an amazing time, especially if you're coming out of college when things are hard, to just learn. Because you don't have any overhead. You just have to, pay rent and put food on and eat. And it's a great time to learn. So I think timing is definitely important though. So you regrouped.
Yep.
Talk to me about your next step.
So regrouped, went and started a company called Silverstone Property Group with two other partners at the time. The concept behind the company was to build an investment company that did property management and acquisitions. That was the concept day one. And the idea was to buy walk-up buildings, small 20 to 50 unit walk-up buildings in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, acquire them, reposition them, do a deep value add, so construction, reposition of those assets, and then lease them up and sell them. So kind of that was the business model. And timing turned, right? So 2009, this was 2009, sort of heading into 2010.
Yep.
Market turned over completely and started to really fly. And we had a very successful, call it 2 to 2.5 years of acquiring those kind of assets. And we were turning them over relatively quickly. So we would acquire a building, we would reposition it within 12 months, lease it up within 3-4 months and sell it. And we created a company that probably at that point had about 10 to 15 people working in it. And that was sort of what we were doing for about 1.5 years, 2 years.
Now, was that just existing assets doing value add, or were you doing ground up construction then?
So we started, the first 1.5 years was just value add. And then about 1.5 years into it, we started to buy smaller development sites and started to build ground up multifamily.
Okay.
And we were super early in Brooklyn. And that's sort of where we started to do most of our ground up development deals. Whereas like Williamsburg, before Williamsburg is what we all know today, it was just warehouses. There was nothing. We were one of the first 3-4 buildings. There were a couple buildings on the water that Jeff Levine had built, but beyond that, it was just flat, all warehouses.
I remember being, because we owned and developed a little in Williamsburg, and going into both Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and all those areas that were gentrifying at the time. In like 2008, 2009, 2010, you could just see what was happening, but not that many people. There was so much opportunity, but still, it wasn't 100% obvious.
It's hard, as I've matured, you realize that like institutional capital, which is where all the big money comes from and sort of develops these requires data.
Yeah.
Right. So at the time, myself and you, we weren't dealing with institutional capital. Our capital at the time was more high net worth and family office and smaller investors. And, there wasn't enough data to support a business thesis that an institution could underwrite and go to their committee and say, look, there's these 30 buildings. Here's the math. Here's this. It's boxed up. Once it's boxed up, then the capital comes flying in.
Right. And then the opportunity set is smaller.
100%. So I think if you generally look at gentrifying neighborhoods, you'll see that's done by fairly entrepreneurial people with family money or family office money. The institutions will come 1 year or 2 or 3 later when the data is there to support the growth.
Yep. So you ended up buying out your partners and starting Slate Property Group.
Right.
Talk to me about who you did that with,
Sure.
Who your partners are now, kind of what the initial concept was in the early years.
Sure. So, the idea was that we wanted to really grow the business significantly, a little less on the management side, more on the acquisitions investment side. So at the time, David Schwartz, who's my partner now at Slate Property Group, was running our development arm and sort of distressed debt arm at Silverstone. So we decided to buy out our partners and move on to rebrand the company called Slate Property Group. We actually took the underlying staff and sort of all the deals with us day one. So it was sort of a rebranding of the company. And then from there, we really expanded our development business, particularly because our multifamily value add business was already pretty strong. And we started to build a significant amount of ground up residential buildings, particularly in Brooklyn and Queens. And I would say from 2012 to 2015, 16, we were probably one of the more active developers of 50 to 150 unit development sites in Brooklyn and Queens. And we increased our size of value add reposition buildings, which we were typically buying in Manhattan, to 50 to 200 unit buildings. And so we went on a really strong acquisition growth phase, and built out different verticals within the business as we continue to grow, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
No, totally. So doing ground up development and doing existing value add are two very different, very different skill sets and very different, risk profiles. From the ground up perspective, were you doing mostly condos, or were you doing rentals, or both? And kind of how did you manage going from, you're running the company doing just value add to all of a sudden a big component of your business is now ground up construction?
So first, my partner, Dave, comes from a background of construction development, right? I come from one as well, but he spent 10 years literally on construction sites, building buildings. I spent more of my time on the development side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the complementary skill sets that we had together was very additive. I was able to sort of handle the multifamily acquisition business, the capital raising, that kind of stuff. And he was able to handle the development and the construction side of the business. And we trust each other. And so we were able to really branch out and build out people to support whatever we were trying to develop at the time. And we also partnered with other general partners. So we would co-GP, which essentially means like, you're sharing partnership of responsibilities and all kinds of things that come along with being like co-developer on a project. And so there was a group that we partnered with on probably a dozen deals of ground up multifamily in Brooklyn and Queens. We're still good friends with them and still partners with them. And we were able to then sort of lay off work onto each one of the different companies. So as we had independent companies, well, we would cross over on 80% of the ground up development deals we were doing.
So there's a really interesting point, and it's something I want to like touch on and really kind of go into details, because I think especially if you're young and you're starting a business in your, you know, in your early years of it, you don't have the experience, you don't have the balance sheet, you can not have a lot of the, or even the execution capability, but you can co-GP with other firms that have that to kind of bring that. Can you kind of just walk me through exactly like how a co-GP deal works and kind of how you would structure it with your partners? It doesn't have to be specifically yours, but kind of the real benefits there.
Yeah, I mean, there's two different ways. I think we should, if we want to dig into it in detail, I think there's two different types of co-GPs. There's the one where you actually are sharing responsibility and you're quote unquote 50-50 with your partner, and you have responsibilities, they have responsibilities, you share in the profits and fees of all those different things. And the other is where you're literally bringing someone in for experience and balance sheet, but you are the operator doing all of the work and you're relying on your co-GP partner to provide financial resources as well as expertise, but not day to day.
Yep.
And so there are differences there that are important to understand. We went route one to start, which was actually sharing responsibility 50-50 with another company.
Right.
We both had to put up our balance sheets. We both had to raise money. We both had to do everything. And we divided and conquered deal by deal on who was going to do sort of what components of it. Today, as where we are in our careers now, we actually provide the ladder to other younger developers.
Right.
So we are now working with a handful of people throughout the United States to back them as a co-GP more on the financial capabilities that we can provide to them, as well as just the knowledge and resources that we can give to them as they grow their businesses. And that could be long lasting, or it could be, hey, we're getting this amazing, young, talented male or female off the ground. And then they're going to say, we love you. Thank you so much. And they're going to move on to the next thing. That's okay too. Like both of those are okay.
All the listeners out there hear that. If you have any interesting deals that you need a co-GP partner on, give Martin a call.
100%.
So we're in like 2015 now, right? You've become one of the more active, real estate owner operators in the multifamily space, both from existing value add and also ground up construction. You started to do something very interesting along the way, and you touched on it earlier, but I want you to kind of go into detail. You started building different verticals within your own organization, so you could handle everything. They were their own separate businesses. So construction, eventually lending, management. Can you walk me through each of those and kind of how those came about and how you actually structure them and kind of and how they operate now?
Sure. So let's bifurcate out sort of the operating verticals versus the investment verticals, because I would view sort of like our equity investment and our credit investment as like an equity investment versus the operating verticals that we operate underneath sort of the Slate umbrella. Yep. So since day one, we always had a property management concept, right? Which means that we are going to operate the leasing and property management of our buildings that we acquire. So that was day one.
Yep.
About 4 years into it, we decided to open up a leasing company where we started to lease all of our own properties ourselves as opposed to third-party companies. And a lot of it has to do with scale. Like at what point does it make sense to bring those resources internal versus having a third party do it? And the answer is you need enough scale to make that vertical profitable so that you're not losing money trying to operate the business.
Right.
So that's a key factor I think anyone should think about is what is going to be the cost to operate this business? Am I profitable? You cannot be profitable for a year or 2 or 3. That's up to you. Right. But can I capitalize that? And when will I become profitable? Like you shouldn't run a business unless ultimately it's going to be profitable.
So let me just ask about the service lines, both management and leasing. Was the main goal there to actually have that be a profitable enterprise, or was it just quality control for the assets that you own, or was it both?
I think it's both. Like for us, I think there's a value to being able to control the transaction from start to finish.
Right.
That I think is number one. But I wouldn't do it if it was costing me money every single day. Right. I think there's a limit to how valuable that is, at which point, like, hey, I'm losing money on this for 5 years. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think it's both. And that's why I think the volume of how much you can put into the different business lines is very relevant, because you do have an overhead and a cost to operating those business lines.
Right.
So we opened up our management company, then a leasing company. Then we opened up a construction company where we started to act as our own GC and self-performer of construction.
How did you structure that off the bat?
So day one, we actually went and acquired a smaller construction company that was working with us on a couple of our deals. So we had experience with this owner, and we acquired their company and rebranded it into what we call today, which is SD Construction. And that's how we went about acquiring sort of and building out our construction company. The other verticals, we actually just built from the ground up.
So from the construction standpoint, and I guess also from the management leasing standpoint, were you doing third party work or only your assets and your projects?
Everything we do is for our own account. So we've never actually done any third party work or insignificant amount of third party work, maybe as a favor to someone who has a problem. But like 99% of what we do on all of our verticals still today is direct for our own account.
So from a service standpoint, you then had management, leasing, construction. Now that's it, right?
Yeah. And then what we've also built out now is a full development team. So we have in-house architects, engineers, all that kind of stuff who work on our development deals. And we've built out an asset management team, right? That asset manage all the different investments that we make. So we have 150 people now who work in all those different verticals. And one comment you made earlier, we treat each one of those businesses as its own business.
Right.
So it has its own profit and loss, its own balance sheet. And we look at it every single month saying, okay, how has this been performing? How is it budgeted? So that there's sort of like accountability for whoever's running that specific division for sort of goals and expectations.
Truly vertically integrated. A lot of people say they're vertically integrated. Yeah. This is true vertical integration from the operations standpoint.
I agree.
So now on the equity, credit, affordable housing kind of bucket, talk to me about those different.
Yeah. So, the other way that we wanted to diversify. So all of this is to diversify your business, right? Because I think I've seen, right, from when I failed, I look back, why did I fail? I failed at N2 when I was trying to do this specific bucket of work and it wasn't working. And it wasn't due to lack of effort. It was like, it just wasn't working. So you need to have a diversified business that during different cycles in the market, you're able to be profitable and you're able to continue to build your business.
Yep.
So the verticals are one component of it. And then you have an investment component of it. And we obviously have a strong engine for buying buildings and developing multifamily housing. That engine's been since day one. But what happens when that market isn't there for you? Which we've just run into, in my opinion, for the last 2+ years.
In New York.
Right?
Yeah.
The equity market's been super tough for us to transact in. So first thing we did was we built out an affordable housing business, like an investment business. Because typically we were dealing with market rate housing. And you had asked earlier about 10% of our portfolio is condo, 90% is multifamily. But we had
multifamily rental.
So, but that was all market rate. So there are times where market rate's great and there are times market rate's not. So we built out an affordable housing business where we developed truly affordable, capital A affordable, not some of the labels that other people put on workforce housing, like 30% AMI, 40% AMI, ground up development, or buying of Section 8 mark-to-market housing, LIHTC deals, that kind of truly affordable housing. And that now has its own division, about 10 people who work specifically in the affordable housing division. And we are a very active affordable housing developer in New York, as well as in Florida, as well as we're trying in California and actually in Ohio. So we're trying to expand our footprint into other markets for affordable housing. And that's grown into a really great business. And I think being vertically integrated really helps you in the affordable housing business.
I couldn't agree more. And it's also kudos to you, because I think it's one of the hardest moats out there to try to go from being a normal market rate developer or market rate investor to truly understand the affordable housing business. It's a very high barrier to entry.
Yeah, it is. And I think I think relationships in the business is the most important part of any business, period.
Yeah.
And I think in real estate, for sure, that's the case. And I think we were fortunate to have really good relationships with other affordable housing developers who helped us learn the business and grow in the business. That's how you learn. I mean, you got to learn from people who have been doing it for a long time. And we were very fortunate there.
So did you structure those first few deals in the affordable housing business kind of in that co-GP manner, where you bring in another affordable housing developer and that's kind of how you learned and build your business?
Yes.
That's great.
So that's how we grew that side of the business. And then the credit side of the business was the last vertical for us that we thought was really important for us to have to diversify the business. And so about 9 years ago, we started our credit business, which we call Scale. And that business focuses on ground up construction loans or value add loans or bridge loans to other like-minded developers. So we've been doing that now for 8-9 years. We've deployed $5 billion in the credit business, and it's grown into a sizable part of the business, and it really diversifies us. So when I look at our business today, I look at it as we are owner, operator, developers, and lenders across all spectrums of living. And what I mean by that is it could be super high-end rental or condo, all the way down to truly affordable or transitional housing development, and anywhere in between. So anywhere in the economic spectrum of living, we have the ability to provide housing. And now anywhere in the capital stack. So we can be your senior lender, we could be your mezz lender, we could be your pref equity, or we could be the developer ourselves. So I really think it has allowed us to think through recessionary environments. How do you live through recessionary environments? And in recessions, credit is really interesting. When the market's booming, equity is super interesting. And now we have the flexibility to have that pendulum swing depending on where we think the investments are interesting versus forcing an investment because we have to do something.
Right. So I think, like, how do you think through whether a vertical you think is something that you guys are going to be able to successfully execute? And second part of that is there any verticals that you guys started that did not work out that you cut?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is like, what are our investment thesis? Like, we sit down as a firm annually and think through where do we want to be 12 months from now and 5 years from now. And we think that through together as like with the senior management team that we have on our firm. And we come up with investment theses. And then we say, okay, we like that thesis. We're willing to invest dollars to look into that thesis and take risk associated with it. And then let's revisit it and see how it goes.
Right.
And so to answer your question, yes, we've tried things that we did not feel like they were going the right direction and we closed them down. We opened up an office on the West Coast and we started acquiring multifamily housing in California specifically. And fast forward, we just did not think that was a sustainable business for us. What we realized for us, right, other businesses can do it differently. We feel like we need to be hands-on. And we found it really hard to be hands-on when you couldn't get there and back in the same day.
Right.
So what that did for us is saying, okay, that didn't work for us. You need to cut it off. And how did you learn from it? And what can we do to continue to grow? And so our takeaway was, love the idea of expanding outside of the New York metro area because I think that's also important.
Yep.
But we want to be able to get there and back in a day.
Does that also apply for your credit business?
Yes. Yes. And so we now invest up and down the East Coast because we can get in and out up and down the East Coast. So we have Florida, North and South Carolina, Boston, DC, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. So we're up and down the East Coast markets, high barriers to entry. There are a lot of markets we are watching, which we think could be really interesting down the road, but we're going to stay focused that we want to be able to get on a plane at 6 o'clock in the morning, land by 8, and be back on a plane at 6 o'clock at night and land at 8. Yeah. And that way, if there's anything I need to ever do, I can be there and back and go visit the property in the same day. That's harder to do in California. We had a really hard time.
Definitely, especially at time change, the whole thing can mess you up. So one of the things you've done that I think is so, I'm just a firm believer in this, like there was a complete kind of change. It used to be the first part of our careers, you look back at a lot of people who were super successful in a lot of companies and they just focused on one thing in one location and they did that better than everyone. What you've done and what I believe in is you've constantly reinvented yourself within your expertise. And I think that's like one of the most important things you can do going forward, because especially in this world, it's changing by the day with AI and different opportunity sets and different locations. Understanding where you can use your skill set and your expertise and then branching out for new opportunities, I think is in adapting to new business lines. I think it's one of the most important things any real estate entrepreneur can do.
I completely agree. Look, it's hard. It's hard to make those decisions. And I think you have to have a certain amount of success that leads to some confidence, that leads to risk taking.
Yep.
I think those kind of go together. And the more you have that positive reassurance, the more you're willing to say, okay, like, let me try something new.
Yep.
And there are failures. And like I said to you, I've had a big failure in my first change when I went to work for myself, and we failed on different types of investments, like the one in the West Coast. Like,
Yeah.
Didn't make sense for us, wasn't the right. You have to accept that, and you have to be smart enough to pivot.
Couldn't agree more. Now you did something that's pretty, I thought it was very, very interesting. And I thought it was actually an incredible, strategic decision that not a lot of founders do, especially in the real estate business. You made the decision along with your partners to hire a management team and step back. As you started this company along with your partners. You've been a real estate entrepreneur now for 20 years. You decided the best decision for you and for future growth was hiring a CEO, hiring a management team. Very, it's not done that much, especially with companies that aren't like public institutions. Tell me about that decision.
Yeah, it's, when you first start, like everyone, you're sort of piecemealing the business, and you have to, right? You gotta be really careful of your costs and your operating expenses and all those kind of things. And I think we were, and you got to do a lot of the work, right?
Yeah.
Go back to like, do you know how to actually do the work that you're telling everyone you know how to do? So in the beginning, we did all the work ourselves. And as we continue to grow, we realized we need to institutionalize this business, right? Because where we wanted to take the business wasn't just to be a mom and pop operator. We really felt like we had the skill set and started to have the investor base to grow the business dramatically. And the way to do that is you have to be able to, I need to spend a lot of my time, and my partner needs to spend a lot of his time growing the overall business and operating the day-to-day like was an exterminator in the person's apartment at the right time, less. And so to do that, you have to make a decision to build your business and to invest back into your business, which is a big decision. Do you believe enough in the business to invest back into the business and take less money out, but invest back into it? So about probably 6-7 years ago, we decided consciously we are going to build a senior team of people to help us grow the business and operate the business. And there's different levels there, right? So we hired a CEO. We hired a president. We hired a COO. We hired a new CFO. We hired a CIO, right? So now we have very smart, well-liked, and well-established people really overseeing the different parts of the business and growing them. It's not just about managing them, right? Because we can manage them ourselves for the most part. It's about how do you take that business and help us grow the business so that Slate overall is growing and becoming more large and more institutional in quality. And so that was a decision made, and we're still building at it, right? That's an ongoing process. It's working great, and we'll continue to sort of build out those businesses and the different verticals underneath the different senior members to help them grow their divisions.
Was it hard for you to let go?
Yes. It's very hard for me. It's still today very hard. I have to consciously try to like remove myself enough that I let people do what they want to do, but not remove myself enough that I don't have a feel for what's happening day to day from top to bottom. Because that I think is an important thing. Like I don't ever want to lose the feel for what's happening at the buildings and development sites and that sort of stuff. Obviously, I have a feel every day for what's happening on the high level stuff like capital raising and debt and equity and acquisitions. But like the operational side of it, I think understanding it and having real-time data is very important to making smart investment decisions.
So what have you done with your time that the management team has freed you up for, where you're kind of focusing on what you do the best and what you really want to be doing?
I mean, we have a lot of, which I hated, right? When I was growing up, like this concept of weekly meetings and bi-monthly meetings. Like I hated the concept. I'm now the one being like, I need a weekly meeting. Because that must be really annoying for everyone else.
The world is round.
Yeah. So there's just certain information that I think I need to have to be successful in what I want to be doing. And the information is when I go and I spend most of my time today, helping to grow the investor base of our business, helping to originate new acquisitions, new loans, trying to think through where should we grow the business next, right? Those kind of things. The first questions I'm always asked by the people that we're speaking to is, tell me about your portfolio. How's it performing? What do you think about this political issue? What do you think about this building, this neighborhood? And not having the details is, in my opinion, what differentiates someone who thinks that they're generating. Like I could go read a CBRE report about the market that has my buildings in it that's 1 year old, like the information's stale, and go pitch that business. What's different for us is I actually have week over week real data on a 5,000 unit portfolio and 1,000 units we're building and a $1.5 billion book of credit. What's happening day to day?
That's what gives you the competitive advantage from a new investment standpoint as well. Exactly. So it's been awesome watching you and Dave build Slate all these years. Like, what would you say? Like, there's a segment I like to talk about every podcast. Like, what's your 90-mile-an-hour fastball? Like, what is your skill set that kind of is your competitive advantage that you think has led to your success over the years?
It's a good question. I don't know if it's one thing, but maybe one or two or three things. I think number one, I'm very focused on relationships. I said it earlier.
Yep.
I think developing relationships from when I was 20 to now sadly 50 is an important part of what I think is relevant in life and very important in business. The people that we generally do business with are people we've been doing business with forever. Almost all of my partners are friends, and being honest and true and respectful and transparent is by far the most important advice I could give anyone, period. It may not feel good at the time that you have to tell someone the truth or not the truth,
right,
but that's the number one item. I would say being able to multitask, I think, is a unique skill set that I feel like I have that's a bit different. I'm able to compartmentalize problems, good, bad, or indifferent, both from a family perspective, at work perspective, all those dynamics, and compartmentalize them to that moment in time and deal with it, and have a clear head after that to sort of go make decisions on other parts of the business. And then I think getting lucky. Like, I think at the end of the day, we were talking about timing.
Yeah.
You need to know when the timing is. Now I feel like I can feel it. But like when I was younger, I couldn't feel, like we had said earlier, it's good for someone to come into the business day because it's tough. So they're going to come into a business that's really tough, and they're going to see a lot of interesting things and workouts. And then all of a sudden you're going to feel it loosen up a little bit. When you have that feeling, you need to be aggressive.
Go all in.
You need to be aggressive.
Absolutely. So if you were starting a business today and you had no money, no relationships, what would you do? How would you start it?
I would bring in a co-GP mentor type investor / partner. I think it's so important. I think it's really hard to just start from scratch with nothing.
Right.
I look at most people I know who've been successful. It has been with some support from either financial support, personal support on business models and plans. I would find that group, that person, that whatever, to help me mold the business and have a sounding board to come back with as you keep testing things.
It's great advice. One last question on advice. I know you have kids in college, and it's a very interesting, changing world for everybody. What advice would you give? What is the one piece of advice that you think would be the best for kids coming out of college who want to establish a career and build a business like you have, in their 20s, what they should do?
Look, I think when you're given an opportunity, you need to run through the wall when that opportunity is given to you. And I look back at my days at sort of Wells Hill when I first came out of college for myself, right? I had no right getting a job being an investment banker at a real estate firm.
Yeah.
I had no right. So as soon as I got it, I was like, I am going to work harder and smarter than anyone else. I'm going to outwork everyone because I don't belong here. And so I think if you take the perspective of like, I don't belong here, so I have to outwork and outsmart to the best of your ability everyone while maintaining amazing relationships. It's a hard challenge to sort of balance all of that. But I think that you need to take the opportunities that are given to you and run with them as fast as you can. And then the other advice I gave earlier was like, if you find someone who's willing to mentor you, who has really good advice and sort of direction, you should take advantage of that until they tell you can't take advantage of it anymore.
Couldn't agree more. Having that chip on your shoulder, I think, is one of the biggest competitive advantages you could possibly have. You can go look at so many different successful people, from athletes to business people. At some point in their life, they failed or they feel slighted or they think they don't belong in a certain place, and you use that as a positive to really, build momentum and work hard. And I think it does wonders.
I agree.
Martin, thanks so much for being here today, man. This has been awesome.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.